Tea. It is a delicate leaf renowned for its ability to stimulate and soothe. Once infused with water, it becomes the second most consumed drink in the world. We all have had it at least once in our lives, either iced or steaming hot. Maybe you liked it, maybe you didn't. Yet there is no denying this one leaf has played a significant role in the history of the world. It has caused wars, changed economies, and sparked one of the most important revolutions ever. Tea began in ancient China. It was said that in 2737 BC, the Emperor Shennong was sitting beneath a tree while boiling some water, when some dried leaves blew into his water. Curious about the brown liquid, he decided to try the infusion that was accidentally created. He found the liquid to be very refreshing, and thus, tea was born. Tea didn't become really popular until the 4th century CE. During this time, tea became deliberately cultivated instead of simply being harvested from wild bushes. Before, tea was mostly referred to as a medicine or a religious beverage. During the Tang Dynasty, though, tea became the national beverage. This time was also considered the golden age of Chinese history. China was the largest, wealthiest, and most populous empire in the world. The overall population between 630 and 755 AD tripled in size to exceed 50 million, and its capital Chang'an was the grandest and largest in the world. The overall prosperity of China was greatly due to the widespread consumption of tea. Tea's powerful antiseptic qualities meant it was safer to drink than rice millet or beer, even if the water was not properly boiled. Tea dramatically reduced the prevalence of waterborne diseases. The infant mortality rate went down, and it increased longevity. A safe source of hydration gave China a huge advantage over the rest of the world. Tea also had a more visible economic impact. As the size of tea trade grew in the 7th century, Chinese merchants had to carry large sums of money. This led to the invention of paper money. Tea itself was also used as a form of currency. It was a good alternative to the paper form because paper diminished the further it was taken out of the imperial center, and tea could also be consumed if necessary. Tea made its way to Japan in 1191 AD. It was brought by a Buddhist monk named Issei. Issei wrote a book extolling the many health benefits of tea, so when Japan's shogun Minamoto fell ill, Issei cured him with the help of homegrown tea. The shogun became a strong advocate of tea, so the drink's popularity spread throughout the country. The Japanese tea ceremony was a result of the popularity of tea in Japan. The ceremony is an immensely intricate and almost mystical ritual that can take more than an hour. The Japanese tea ceremony was the very pinnacle of tea culture in Japan. The Portuguese and the Dutch were the first to bring tea to Europe in 1610. From the Netherlands and Portugal, tea reached France in 1630, and then England in 1650. Although tea was available in Europe during the 17th century, it did not have much of an impact because of its immense cost. It started out as a medical drink in the Netherlands, then in 1615 the French aristocracy took a liking to it. But by 1700s, tea was later eclipsed by coffee and chocolate. Ultimately, it was Britain that emerged as the most tea-loving European nation. Tea got its start in England in 1662 when Charles II married Catherine of Braganza, the daughter of the King of Portugal and a devoted tea drinker. She introduced tea to the English court, and the trend caught on immediately. While Catherine made tea popular, the East India Trading Company made it available. The East India Company had a monopoly on all of the trade from the East to Britain. They imported spices and cheap textiles in the beginning, then they started shipping tea. Their first import of tea was in 1669. It started out as a small, expensive commodity costing around 6 to 10 pounds. By 1700, it had fallen to 4 pounds. This, though, was still very expensive when, at the time, the average family's income was around 20 pounds annually. Only when the company established trading posts in China in the early 18th century and began direct imports of tea did the quantity increase and the price fall. At its height, tea was more than 60% of the company's total trade, and the duty on the tea accounted for about 10% of British government revenue. As a result, control of the tea trade gave the company a huge amount of political power, enabling it to have laws passed in their favor. What had started out as a simple trading company ended up wielding more power than any other commercial organization in history, mostly because of tea. For a long time, the English aristocrats were the only ones who could afford tea because it was so heavily taxed, 119% at one point. This started an enormous black market. By the 1770s, half the tea in England was illegal. Bootleg tea was heavily adulterated, filled with twigs and sawdust, and often colored with sheep dung and toxic chemicals such as lead. Tea taxing created even bigger problems overseas, in the American colonies. Tea was just as popular in America as it was in England, yet it was also such a hot political issue that it led to an event that changed history forever. This was the infamous Boston Tea Party, a protest against tea duties that took place in December 1773. It sparked off the American Revolutionary War and so eventually led to the United States of America becoming an independent nation instead of a group of British colonies. The Tea Act was passed because the East India Company was in debt. This was at the time when tea smuggling in England and the colonies was at its height. The result was the company was not selling much tea. The company persuaded the government to pass the Tea Act of 1773. This allowed them to sell tea directly to the Americas, unlike before when it had to go through London. They also had to sell tea at a price that included high British duties. The Americans were not happy about paying more taxes to the British, so in late November and early December 1773, 3 ships loaded with 342 chests of tea reached Boston Harbor. The people of Boston refused to let the tea be unloaded because of taxation without representation. So on the evening of December 16th, a group of angry colonists disguised as Indians boarded the ships and dumped the tea into the harbor. This event pushed British-American relations to the boiling point. So in less than 3 years, the Revolutionary War was underway, and the rest was history. The Industrial Revolution was also majorly affected by tea. While coal and steam fueled the machines, tea fueled the people operating them. It was the beverage best suited for someone who had to be on alert on long and tedious shifts because of the presence of caffeine. It also kept them calm and full because of the antioxidants. Like in China, tea also killed most of the waterborne diseases. Between 1730 and 1796, waterborne diseases decreased so much their names became obsolete. This allowed large cities to grow and the infant mortality rate to drop, creating a large labor pool just as the Industrial Revolution took hold. Tea also shook up the advertisement world as we know it today. Josiah Wedgwood was the owner of a company that produced tea services. When Queen Charlotte ordered a complete set of tea things, he secured her permission to sell items under the name The Queen's Wear, thus pioneering the use of celebrity endorsements. Tea was so important to the English they were willing to go to war for it. For example, the 19th century opium wars with China was caused by tea. What happened was China had a global monopoly on selling tea, and they weren't interested in selling it for anything but silver. This led to a trade imbalance with England known as the Silver Sink. The British tried to offset this by exporting Indian-grown opium to the Chinese. Opium addiction soon became a serious national problem in China, and when the Chinese government tried to make the use of opium illegal, Britain provoked a war. With their superior firearms, the British won the wars, and with it, not only the right to continue selling opium in China, but also a new colony, Hong Kong. The trade imbalance with China and the fact that the East India Trading Company lost their royal monopoly with the Orient in 1834 prompted the EIC to cultivate tea outside of China. An indigenous tea plant had been found in the Assam region of India in 1820, and in India they could do as they pleased because it was a British colony. They created massive plantations and it imported tens of thousands of workers to labor in the field. These plantations were modeled after those in the American South. Plantation owners even used laws from antebellum slavery in the U.S. to keep their workers in line. Today we mostly drink tea from an instant bag. India is still the largest producer of tea, with China not far behind. Tea has not caused any political turmoil over the last 70 years. Only recently has it sprung up in the news. Critics of President Barack Obama's handling of the economy are planning nationwide tea parties Wednesday. The protests are named after the 1773 Boston Tea Party. The tea parties are aimed at Obama's $787 billion anti-recession stimulus package and the projected ballooning of the budget deficit. Most of the protesters are in fact part of the Conservative Party. They will be held all over the United States on Wednesday, April 15th. Tea gave England money and power over the rest of the world due to its mass popularity. Places like Hong Kong, England, and India would have much different economies if it weren't for tea. And of course, we would all be speaking in British accents and have bad teeth if it weren't for tea.